If you have your copy of the scriptures, take a look at Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. And Timmy Rankin, are you here? Timmy, our producer, thank you. She got me a nice hot cup of tea. I think tea is virtually useless compared to coffee, but I'm told not to drink caffeine because it dries you out. So thank you, Timmy, for taking care of me with that. From Colossians chapter 3, and we're in our 7th week of our series, Transformed. It's a study of the book of Colossians. I want to begin by asking you a question, and it's this. Why is it that if I have new life in Christ, do I still struggle with old ways? Why is it, Scott, if what you're saying about Christ's power to transform, if that's true, why is it that so often I still battle with those old things? For some, it's bitterness. I just can't seem to get past things in my past. For some, it's sensuality, and we live in such a sex-saturated culture that we feel like constantly we're falling down in that area of sensuality. For others, it's jealousy. I just green with envy at what someone else is enjoying or experiencing or my perception of their life. For others, it's anger. Just about the time you think you've got it conquered, something will remind you of an affront or of an offense, and you go off. For others, it's guilt. A nagging sense that I'll never measure up, a nagging sense of I'm never going to get past it, a nagging sense of I am guilty, I live with shame, and I just cannot really lay out for serving God, because if I speak up about my faith, others are going to say, well, you're a hypocrite because of that. For others, it's greed. No matter how you try, you're just driven by a need for more. The false security that comes from having perhaps a fat bank account or the latest gadgets or the best kinds of things to drive. And for others, it's fear. Sense of being away from God, not being near to Him. There's honestly a sense of distance and fear that comes from saying, I don't measure up. If people only knew what was in my heart. And for some, it's relationships, and it overflows into a series of one relationship after the other that's not satisfying, and I don't give my best, and I don't receive someone else's best. Why, if I am so transformed, if God's power is so great, why do I still fight the battles? One pastor wrote these questions. I think it's true. What's your problem? Temper, impatience, self-control, sex, being honest, your thought life, pride, laziness, self-centeredness. Everyone has skeletons, and they don't always stay in the closet. You want to do right, but you do wrong. You want to choose obedience, but you choose sin. Sometimes, such a great line, sometimes you almost swear you are a split personality, a regular walking civil war. That's as true for pastors it is for members, parishioners. You and I, while we know and have experienced the transforming power of Jesus Christ, while we still live on this earth, are going to fight battles with our old self. Yes, we've been set free. Yes, we've been transformed, and we're in the process of greater transformation. But it's still a battle. And if I live in an unrealistic place of saying, I should have no more problems with my old flesh, you and I are going to be disappointed because that's not reality. Charles Swindoll, pastor from Texas, writes this. We're in the middle of an inescapable fight. And I would suggest that most people fight all alone, in the shadows, out of sight, feeling alone. No wonder so many of us feel defeated by sin and seriously consider giving up. And when we're at our lowest, Satan slips his arm around our shoulders and whispers gently, face it. You'll never be good enough for those people or for God. Why not just give up and accept the inevitable? Besides, that thing you do really doesn't hurt anyone. And at that vulnerable moment, the enemy breaks through. How, I guess the question would be, how can I live on the outside what is true about my inside? How is it that I can live in my experience what I know intellectually is true, that is Jesus Christ, through my faith in his death, burial, and resurrection, Jesus Christ has transformed who I am. He's changed my soul. How can I win the battle of the war within? Colossians chapter 3 deals with that. We're going to look at verses 1 through 11 today. Now, we're going to break between 11 and 12. There's not really much of a break there. So you're going to want to follow up next week. The focus today is going to be largely negative. By that I mean the focus is going to be how to stop doing destructive behaviors or attitudes. Next week, the focus is going to be how to put on or how to add, because nature abhors a vacuum, how to add the right kinds of behaviors and attitudes, all right? So for the most part, not wholly, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about things we should stop doing or get rid of or should cease being a part of our lives this week. And next week, we're going to talk much more about what we bring into effect in our lives that helps us live out on the outside what is true on the inside. Let me begin by giving you the thesis or the theme of verses 1 through 11. It's very simple. It's the argument that the writer, the Apostle Paul, will make as for how and why you and I can live a new life. And it's simply this: you have been given new life. Live like it. I'm not calling us to be masquerading like it's Halloween. In other words, what happens on Halloween is, well, hopefully not anymore but the youngsters dress up like something they're not. Right? They're movie characters, they're goblins or ghosts, they're whatever they are, right? They're not really that. They're dressing up to be that. Some believers live with the understanding or with the feeling, I'm dressing up to be a Christian, but inside really I'm not. What Paul is arguing, that the only way forward to grow in our faith, to experience transformation, is to be on the outside what you already are on the inside. Look at chapter 3, verse 1. He does not begin with a list of to-dos. He does not begin with a stop doing this. He doesn't list some secret we need to know or some rules we have to keep. He begins by reminding us of what really happened. What God has done in our lives, child of God. Verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, and it's a first-class conditional statement. If then, and we believe it's true, NIV translates this, since then, if then you have been raised with Christ, if God has transformed you so that, you look at chapter 2, look at verse 23, the very end of that, they have no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. If the old way of living does not get us to a better place, then why would we keep living that way? If indeed Christ has raised you, the old you's been put to death, and the new you is alive, if that's true, then live it out. If then you have been raised with Christ, and there are 5 imperatives. An imperative is a do this. 5 to-dos, and I could feel it coming on, so I'm going to have to dial it back a little bit. Sorry. Excuse me. Ryan, do you have a mute back there? When I'm going to cough, I'll just let you know mute it, because this would be really bad for those guys to hear it that loud. If then you've been raised with Christ, you've been transformed by the power of Jesus Christ. 5 things. How am I going to live out the inside? First one is this: seek the things that are above. It speaks of goal. It speaks of life's pursuit. If you have been raised with Christ, and if you believe Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, you have been raised with Christ, then we ought to have different goals in life. We should seek different things. Seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. This is about our purpose. This is about our seeking. Let me tell you, 3 stories about that. The first is one of my favorite Old Testament stories. It's an obscure story, but it's so good. 2 Kings chapter 7, the nation of Israel is being surrounded, and their capital city of Samaria is besieged. This has gone on for months to the point that famine and disease stalks the street of Samaria. People are dying. It is an awful, it's one of the darkest scenes in the Old Testament. And into the very midst of that deep loss and turmoil, disease and famine, God sends deliverance. In the middle of the night, the people that were besieging the Syrian army, they hear what they think is troops and chariots coming up, and they flee the battle scene. In the middle of the dark, they just pell-mell make a retreat, and they leave their tents and their supplies. Now, in 2 Kings 7, let me read it for you. There are 4 men, they're lepers, which means they had to live outside the city. They were outcasts because of their medical condition. And they hear these army people retreating, and they go to explore. 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 7. So they, that is the army, fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and they fled for their lives. Then these 4 lepers came to the edge of the camp, and they went into the tent. And they ate and they drank and they carried off silver and gold and clothing. And they went and they hid them. Like, what are you going to... All right, you are a poor person, and all of a sudden you show up with silver and gold and brand new clothes. Like, you think nobody's going to notice? Now, wait a minute, hold on. Hit a mute for a minute while you're... All right, I'm sorry about it, but we got to get through this. So, they carried off silver and gold and clothing, and they went and hid them. Now, wait a minute. And then they came back and entered another tent and carried off the things from it, and they went and hid that. So they're just like getting wheelbarrows full of stuff. And in the middle of the night, and they're thinking, we've hit the jackpot. And then something occurs to them that changes what they were seeking. They said to one another, we are not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we are silent. They knew that the city was dying. They knew people were sick of no food. They realized that people were losing their life, disease, stalking the streets because of lack of food, and they're loading up. And they're hiding it, not sharing it. And I don't know if it was conviction or realization. They thought what we're seeking is all wrong. They came and they called to the gatekeepers of the city, and they told them, we came to the camp of the Syrians. There's no one to be seen. Everything is left. All of them have gone. It's one of the great deliverances of the Old Testament, where God provides for his people by them spoiling the army that had deserted. And you and I so often spend all of our lives seeking the food and the silver and the gold and the clothes, and we have our heads down and we're just doing our part. All along, what God is saying in Colossians chapter 3 is look up and seek higher things than that. You want to live on the outside, what's real on the inside? Change your goals. What I seek has a deep impact on my life. I am to be seeking those things. There is a great poem by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. I don't know how good my poetry reading skills are going to be right now, but let me read it to you. I'll take my time. And it speaks of our goal, our purpose. That is, what is it we're pursuing in life? One ship drives east and another drives west, with the very same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not of the gales which tells us the way to go. Like the winds of the seas are the ways of life as we voyage along. 'Tis the set of a soul that decides its goal, and not the calm or the strife. Seek the things that are above. Let me talk to you about what I mean by that. How when you change what it is you're pursuing, when you change your goal, it changes your behavior. So, What I seek impacts my relationships. If I'm a single person, what I'm seeking is not just a beautiful woman or a handsome man or to be able to get what I want out of a relationship. What I'm seeking is a life's partner, if I feel like I'm called to marriage. I'm seeking a life's partner that will help me on my path towards spiritual growth. So it matters to me what their character is like. It matters to me how important God is in their life. If I'm single and I want to model my faith, it matters to me how I order my life in relationship. If I'm a married man or a married woman, it matters to me if my goal is just what can I get out of the marriage? Why am I constantly frustrated about what she or he is not providing for me? Rather, I begin to say, listen, this is such a critical thought. What is it God is doing in my life through this person to whom I'm married? Because I believe marriage is one of the greatest sanctifying tools in God's arsenal. So often we fixate on praying for our spouse. God, if you would just change her heart. God, if you would just change his heart. When all along what God is doing is changing our heart, sometimes through really painful, frustrating moments. What am I seeking? Comfort? Or the things that are above? How about my relationships with my children? Yes, I want them to be successful. Yes, I want them to be well educated. I want them to be secure. I also want them to have a heart for God, and it should break my heart when they don't. I'm seeking those things. Listen. When I sign them up for sports, when I enroll them in school, and make sure that there's priority, that they're going to learn something about the God we serve. How important that is in dad and mom's life. What I seek impacts my relationships and impacts my resources. You should do well. You should be very careful and thoughtful and conservative with your finances, with your house, with your cars. You should also recognize that God will take and sanctify that which we have as we give it away and share it for mission and ministry. Maybe we have to answer the question, when was the last time I did something that was financially silly that advanced the kingdom of God? I will say to you that Vicki and I have never taken one step forward spiritually that didn't involve some risk financially. Some of you need to do that too. Because when you seek the things that are above, it has an impact on my relationship and my resources, also on my behavior. So that I don't just do what I want, not caring about that. It's my right. I can do what I want. Rather, I say, you know what? If I'm going to seek the things that are above, my heart is different. It's new. I ought to be living like that in my behavior. The words that I say. In my serving, what I seek impacts my serving. Whoops. It should impact how we drink, too. This is too high tech for me, I think. Just take the lid off. That worked better. It's really hard to recover a serious moment after that, isn't it? How did I do? Oh, I think I did all right. And then fifth, I'm working on it. Give me a moment. It impacts our suffering too. By that, I don't mean that we are some sort of sadistic folk who think, you know what, God, give me suffering that I can enjoy. No, be more like Christ suffering. No. But when I suffer, if I have an earthly mindset, if I'm seeking only those things that I can see, feel, taste, touch, I'm going to do anything I can, including at times compromising my faith to get past suffering. When I look at the things that are above and I seek the things that are above, what I'm going to do is recognize suffering so often serves a greater purpose of making me like Christ. And while I don't purposely endure or purposely pursue suffering, I can endure it with character because God's done something on the inside. So the highest goal is not just get through it as quickly as you can. The highest goal is answering the question, what is God doing about my eternal future in my heart? So Romans 8:18 says, suffering is working for us an eternal weight of glory that far surpasses all that we experience now. Hit a mute, will you, for a minute, Ryan? You don't want to be a part of that either. All right. Second, the second imperative, verse 2. Seek is about purpose. Can we see our purpose through the eyes of what Jesus Christ is doing now and for eternity? Second one is set. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. This is about your mind. This is about our mindset. As a person thinks in his heart, so is he. We should, as one writer said this week I read, take your mind by the hand. Controlling our thinking. Now listen. This is a discipline you must develop. I must develop. We cannot give free rein to our mind to just run everywhere, pell-mell, helter-skelter. Vicki and I love to be able to take our dog for a walk because it's a great way to talk, and it's exactly 1 mile from our driveway around the south edge of our neighborhood back to our driveway. So when we take our dog for a walk, we have a very clear purpose, we have a very clear destination in mind. Down to the south cul-de-sac, there's beautiful wetlands and an open field there, acres of it. We walk there, come back around there, go past the prairie path, and back down to the west cul-de-sac, and we circle around there. Often he'll see some doggy friends, and they'll get to play and things like that. That's what we envision. Here's what reality is as we're walking, right? The dog is going this way. That smells great. Let me do that. And then he's going to go chase a squirrel across there. And then he's going to sprinkle this bush, and he's going to sprinkle the next bush. And so while Vicki and I walk a mile, he probably walks 8 because he's doing like this. Your mind will do this if you let it off the leash. You'll worry, you'll fret, you'll spiral. Like a dog worrying over a bone, your mind will control you. Get a handle on it. Paul writes very clear, set your minds on things that are above. You've heard the old saying, he's so heavenly minded, he's no earthly good. The reality is the only people that are earthly good have a heavenly mindset. Do you evaluate things in the light of eternity? Honestly, the things that we worry about the most don't matter a month from now, let alone 1,000,000 years from now. Gain some perspective on that by setting, and it's second person plural, you, congregation, do this. God has already given you some gifts, like a brand new life. As part of that responsibility, seek different things and think about different things. Discipline, that is, train your mind. That's going to have an impact on what I read, the podcasts to which I listen, the media that I consume. Parents, the media your children consumes does have an impact. Input does matter to processing and output. Guard that. Be intentional about that. And at some point, think about the things that are eternal. As you do that, those things that are so temporal now tend to find their perspective, and you and I worry less. Set your mind on things that are above. The third imperative, verses 5 through 7. Well, let's go to verse 3. Is again the reason, for you have died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, that is at the second coming, the return, you also will appear with him in glory. That's when your life gets that much better. That's when you fully live out on the outside what's on the inside. Until that time, seek different things and discipline your mind to think different things. Verse 5. The third imperative, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Literally, put to death, therefore, your members on the earth. He said, think about things that are above, not things that are on the earth. Now he says, live like, act like heavenly things, not things on the earth. And he gives us in these next verses what I call the dirty dozen. It's not a list of rules. It's a list of things that should not be in evidence in a Christian's life. Put these things to death. Again, there's the imperative. You, child of God, have the resources to win these battles. Win them. Make sure I know where this place is. Let's list them. Put to death, therefore. Why? Because you've been risen with Christ. because you've been transformed and you have the power to do this. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, all have to do with sensuality. And again, I've already mentioned, we live in such a sex-crazed culture that there is incentive all the time through media, there's incentive all the time through education, incentive all the time just through culture in which we live to indulge. That's the word, indulge. And the biblical concept on this is enjoy in the context of marriage. And outside of that, deny. It's not a word we hear often. If you're single, hear what I'm saying, if you're single and a follower of Jesus Christ, you need to be denying the sexual urges that rage. That means if you're divorced or widowed or never married, God calls us, be serious about modeling moral purity. Put that stuff to death. That means if you're married, enjoy a healthy sexual relationship with your spouse and only with your spouse. Again, I would encourage us to be careful of our consumption of media. Laptop, tablets, phones, they're on-ramps to the internet superhighway, and there is no filter. Put those things to death. Look at the end of verse 5. Not only sexual immorality, impurity, passion. Impurity in particular has to do with sort of seeing the world in a dirty sort of way. Remember I said, fight the battle for the mind? You need to do that. And covetousness, which is seeing everything in terms of dollars and cents. I was going to do the evaluation of what's it going to cost, how's it going to advantage me, how can I take this, and can I run with a wheelbarrow full of it and hide it and not tell anybody else about it? Like our 4 lepers in the story earlier. Put away covetousness, which is idolatry. It's putting something in the place of someone that is God, who should be the center of our worship and our pursuits. On account of these things, the wrath of God is coming. Just a reminder, listen, you cannot live those kinds of lives forever without God judging. Again, not a word we hear much today, but it's true. We can look throughout history at cultures that have fully given themselves over to pursuing these kinds of things. They do not sustain the test of time. They cannot. God brings judgment to bear on that. Now look at verse 7. In these you too once walked when you were living in them. Meaning every one of the things I'm going to mention, the dirty dozen, the 12 behaviors, people sitting in this room have engaged in that. I get it. Used to walk. Not anymore. In fact, look at what happens next. You used to walk when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. There's the fourth imperative. Put to death, and he deals mostly with internal things, sensuality and passion and all of that. And now he says, put away the expressions of that, and look at what he lists. Put them all away. Anger. Anger it's often inside, and people don't know about it. Wrath, the next thing, is the explosion that comes as a result of anger. So some people are angry all the time, but they're just sort of cold or bitter or they're aloof. They hang away from people. That's their expression of anger. By the way, forgetfulness is one of the best expressions of anger and one of the clearest expressions of anger. Oh, I forgot. You forgot? Oh, yeah, I forgot again. It's a passive way to express my anger. And then there's wrath, which is the explosion that comes. It's the volcano finally has been tapped, and look out, because anything in the way is going to get hurt. Anger and wrath. Malice is that intent to harm others. I go through life, and if I have the opportunity to do harm, you know what? I'll do a little harm. Slander is to harm someone with our words. Slander, in fact, I may even tell the truth, but I tell it for the purpose of hurting others. I love Romans 12. Love covers a multitude of sins. You simply don't have to express or explain everything you know. and obscene talk from your mouth. The word literally is blasphemy. It doesn't just mean swear words, that's included in it. It doesn't just mean filthy talk, that's included in the first list, part of the list. It means I'm tearing someone else down. When I blaspheme God, I use his name in a way that hurts his reputation. When I blaspheme others, or in this case, when I am obscene, what comes out of my mouth seeks not to build others up, it tears them down. Christian, child of God, you're new. Why would we let that language happen anymore? And then just to remind us, verse 9, do not lie to one another, seeing that you have, and here it is, right? Again, the foundation for why, it's the fifth imperative, do not lie. The reason for why is not for the hope of keeping some list of rules to gain God's favor. The list of why is because we have been transformed. Do not lie to one another, seeing, and do me a favor, grab me that jacket, will you? Seeing that you have put off the old self, and it's a word from the wardrobe. You have put off the old self with its practices, and you have put on the new self, right? Which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Thank you, I appreciate that. You have, it's past tense. You've already had this done to you. The old ways that led to those behaviors and those attitudes is gone. That's a fact. God did that. He transformed you. And since you put on a new outfit, why don't you live like that? And he lists those things of, hey, in the new outfit, that dirty dozen shouldn't stain that new set of clothes you've got on your soul. And then look at verse 11. By the way, I love verse 10. You have put on, past tense, you've put on the new self, and then present tense, which is being renewed. That will never finish until the day you and I die. It's not perfection, it's transformation. Verse 11. Here, in the new self, when our goal is higher and our minds are higher and we're not giving ourselves to these behaviors that are destructive anymore, here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcision, uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and is in all. In other words, there is no racial, religious, cultural, or social difference among believers. We see people differently, and we embrace them differently because of our faith in Christ. All right, I'm done. I'm out of breath and out of voice. So, musicians, wherever you're at, come on back up here, and let me just do the closing sort of application points. Hit a mute again. I got a cough. All right. 3 applications. 1, the goal is renewal. Live out that which is within. Hey, come on up, guys. Go ahead. I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone else. I'm not saying if I try and do these good things, maybe it'll change me. No, because you've already been fundamentally changed, begin to do these things. Live out that which is within. Don't operate on the, when I fall into sin, that's the real me coming out. No, it's not. That's the old you trying to surface, and you have a responsibility to stomp that out, put them to death. 2nd, the process is inside out. Play the long game. We're in the 3rd chapter of Colossians. We spent 2 chapters saying it's not about secrets, it's not about rules, it's about Christ's power to transform. You were dead, Christ made you alive. Only after we get that fixed in our mind does he begin to say, now, here's what that new life should look like as it is expressed. The process is inside out. We've got to play the long game. Don't get discouraged with failure. Get determined. Get humble. Go before God. God, I'm sorry. It doesn't reflect who I really am. Forgive me. Purify me. Give me grace to go forward. Help me to be more like the Christ you have put already in my soul. It's a long process. You are being renewed. That takes time. The goal is renewal. Live out that which was within. The process is inside out. So play the long game. 3, the strategy is active. Persist in the battle. You are not called to sit back passively and wage this war. You are called to get in there and fight. 5 imperatives, all directed to us. Do this thing. Different goal, different thinking. Put to death. Make sure you set your mind on these things. Don't lie to each other. Get rid of these things. Do this. Be active. Don't be passive. In your walk with Christ, in your battle with the flesh. Persist. Keep it up. Don't quit. Don't lose. Remember the story of Cinderella? Remember that story? Oh, she went to the ball and she got all dressed up, and her wicked stepsisters tried to keep her away, and she shined. And the prince loved her. And the clock struck midnight, and she was so fearful, and she ran home and left the slipper, the shoe. Remember how the prince found her? Searched all throughout the city until he found the shoe, and the shoe fit perfectly. You see, Cinderella was already a princess. She was already that on the inside. That's us. Well, I'm not a princess, but you know what I mean. We've already been transformed. The slipper does fit you. Begin to live it out. Begin to live on the outside what is already true on the inside. I want to pray for you. Father, I pray for those that are waging the war, fighting the battle, that they would be strong. Father, I pray for those that have taken some shots this week. Maybe they've lost the battle. Maybe they've indulged in some of those dirty dozen. I pray they would find forgiveness and freedom. That Satan would not whisper guilt into their ears, but your Spirit would convict them and give them power to live above the tyranny of sin and past failure. Father, I pray that we would live with our minds and our goals set on higher things. That we wouldn't just shuttle back and forth between work, burying our treasure out in the back. You've called us for more than that. Help us to live out our faith. Help us to live with risk. Help us to follow Jesus Christ. Continue your transforming work in our lives, I pray. And I ask this in Jesus' name. All God's people said, Amen. Amen.